Hey budget gardeners, Vita Loca here. Join me today as we pot up some beautiful hanging baskets. So let's go. There are so many ways to save money when it comes to gardening. As you know, I love starting a lot of my plants from seed. In fact, all of the impatiens that you see here were started from seed, and they were started from seed that I collected myself. What I'll do is I'll put links to any of these type of videos that you might be interested in. For example, how to collect your own impatien seeds, how to start impatiens from seed. I even have my own potting mix here that I made myself because I like to save money that way. I'll put a link to that video in case you want to know how to make your own potting mix. But today's video is going to focus on how I save money when it comes to making my own hanging baskets. If you don't have any hanging baskets, this video will still be helpful because it's going to teach you how to put together a beautiful arrangement in some sort of a pot or a container. I like making my own hanging baskets for a number of reasons. First of all, I have control on what plants I'm putting in those hanging baskets. Also, the baskets that I use, I reuse year after year. I bought the baskets from a store close to me called Ocean State Job Lot. It was a very decent price. It might have been $6 or $7. It includes a nice wire basket, but also inside of the basket is a cocoa liner. The cocoa liner can be replaced every few years for just a few dollars. I like to buy my cocoa liners from either Ocean State Job Lot or even on the internet like Amazon. Like I mentioned earlier, I make my own potting mix, and that's how I fill it. You can use whatever potting mix that you feel comfortable with. When it comes to which flowers to use, it really depends on if you're going to be putting your container in a full sun, shade, or part shade situation. All my hanging baskets are going to be placed either in full shade or part shade situations, so I'll be filling them with impatiens. When it comes to containers, there are endless possibilities on how you can fill them. You can fill them all with one color, you can fill them with multiple colors, with one type of plant or multiple types of plants. And then depending on the size of the container, you can pack it with something like a spiller. A spiller would be a plant that spills over the side of your container. Then you could also pack it with fillers. A filler would fill out the center part of the container. And then finally, you could add something like a thriller. And a thriller would be something that comes out of the container and gets nice and tall. Typically, you'd place it towards the center, if not the back of your container. My hanging baskets aren't terribly large, so for that reason, I don't like to overly pack them. Remember, if you overly pack a small container or a pot, it's going to get pot bound or root bound pretty easily. And then all of a sudden, during the middle of summer, your plants might be struggling. So I like to pack them so that they have nice impact, but I also don't want to overly pack them. Over the years, I've tested out a bunch of different types of flowers in my yard, and I've found that the impatiens do the best, which is why I stick with impatiens now in my hanging baskets. I've also experimented with thrillers as well as spillers. I've found that I don't really care for thrillers inside of my small hanging baskets, but I definitely still like to add spillers in them. When it comes to the spillers, again, it could cost a lot of money to fill each of those hanging baskets with spillers. The spillers that I like to use are typically spillers that are either perennials in my yard, or they're spillers that I've been able to buy once, over winter, and then divide over the years. When it comes to spillers, there are so many different possibilities out there, but I wanted to share some of the ones that I love to use in my hanging basket. Let's start with Lamium. Lamium is a wonderful ground cover, and it looks beautiful in the landscape, but it also looks beautiful in a pot or a container. So if you were to buy it this year for the first time, you could put it in a pot or a container, and if it's a perennial in your zone, what you can do at the end of the season is you can take it out of your container and put it somewhere in your landscape. Another perennial that makes for a wonderful ground cover is called Creeping Jenny. Now, Creeping Jenny can be invasive in certain areas, as well as Lamium actually. So you want to make sure you just keep these plants in check if you're going to put them in your landscape. I love Creeping Jenny for its chartreuse color. It makes such a bold impact in any sort of container situation. And it does have a little yellow flower, but it's not really grown for its flower. It's typically grown just for its foliage. Another spiller that I've used for many years is called Vinca vine. Vinca is hardy typically down to zone 7, so it's not usually hardy in where I live here in New Hampshire, zone 5B. Although I've heard of some people being able to overwinter it successfully outdoors, especially if they put it in a warm location like a south-facing location. But what I've done for a number of years is I've actually just overwintered it in my unheated garage, which gets down to about 40 degrees Fahrenheit each year. I bought only one plant a number of years ago, and every single year I've been able to divide the plant into a number of pieces. So that one plant definitely paid for itself over the years. Another spiller that I've used in my container pots is a type of Lismachia. I'll put the full name on the screen. The funny story is I never bought this plant. It was in a container pot in a local area close to me. I took a small cutting of it, I rooted it, and then what I was able to do is create a bunch of plants from those cuttings. And it also has a very beautiful reddish green color foliage to it. Before I go further and show you my process for potting up one of my hanging baskets, I want to hear from you. Let me know if you've ever put together a hanging basket, a pot, or some sort of a container, and what are some of your favorite spillers, thrillers, and fillers. Now the fun begins. I'm going to show you how I plant up one of my hanging baskets. I just wanted to show you before we begin, we've been having a lot of rain lately, so today is a great day to be doing this project on my covered porch. There's something peaceful about still gardening during the rain, and I love it. It's amazing how long these cocoa liners can last for. They usually last me at least 2, if not 3 years. I try to take care of them. At the end of the season, when the plants have gone by and I pull the plants out, I try to be a little bit gentle with it. And come springtime, I look over my cocoa liner, and if I feel that they don't look good, if they've worn out quite a bit, then I know to change them. And what I've found is it typically happens where I just have to change out a few every year. I don't have to change out all of them, which is nice. So the first thing I'm doing is I'm just filling up my hanging basket with the potting mix that I made. It's not pre-moistened. It doesn't need to be pre-moistened at this point, but it doesn't hurt. If you want to pre-moisten it, you can do that as well. I usually tend to water it once I get all my plants in here. Whenever I fill up any pot or container, I don't want to fill it up all the way to the top. The reason is the plants that are going to be put inside the container or pot are also going to have soil that are on their roots. So you want to make sure you leave enough room in your container or pot. So I like to fill it up probably, I'd say 90% of the way to the top. And then when I put my potting mix in there, I'm just pressing down a little bit just to take out some of the air pockets that might be in there. It is very important to fertilize your pots and containers. And if you don't do that, your plants might look really pretty to start with, but over time, they won't look so good. So I like to use Osmocote, which is a slow release fertilizer. I like to put a pinch in each of the planting holes. The other thing I like to do in terms of fertilizer is I also like to do a liquid fertilizer about once a week in all my pots and containers. What I use is all-purpose Miracle-Gro. You can use whatever fertilizer that you feel comfortable with. I just can't stress that enough. You want to make sure you're fertilizing your plants because a lot of times these plants are heavy feeders. My potting mix that I made, it does have compost in it. It has some good nutrients in there, but a lot of the nutrients get leached out every time you water or every time it rains. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to place the Impatiens inside of the hanging basket. So I'm just going to make a small hole, and then I'm just going to put a pinch of my slow release fertilizer inside the planting hole. Since we have a wide variety of colors to play with here, I personally like a mix of colors in my hanging baskets. There are some darker Impatiens in here. There are some lighter Impatiens in here. And since they're all mostly blooming for me, I can see their colors and I can play around with the colors inside of my basket. And I usually go for a mix of some light colors coupled with a mix of some dark colors. It really just gives a nice contrast in the baskets. I'm just squeezing my 6-cell pack. And if you didn't start your plants from seed and you bought your plants, you also want to do the same thing. You want to be gentle when you pull your plants out of the pot or the container that they're in. And then you want to check the roots. If the plant is very pot bound or root bound, in other words, if there's a lot of roots that are all going around in a circle, you want to tease the roots a little bit. That helps the plant to be able to take up the nutrients and the water inside your potting container. Otherwise, what will happen is once you plant it, those roots will continue circling, and it's not good for the plant. In past years, I would skimp out a little bit when it came to my pots and containers. Now, I grow so much from seed that there's no reason for me to do that. I would rather pack it nice and full because I want instant impact. Go ahead and I'm going to make another hole here with my hand. Add some more slow release fertilizer. We'll go for a little bit of a darker color this time. I'm loosening up the roots. And in terms of a planting depth, I just want to make sure that I'm planting it deep enough so that the plant is good and secure and I'm pressing down on it. I don't want the plant to be tall and leggy and falling over. So I want to make sure I anchor those roots right into the potting mix. And then I can even shake the basket just to settle the potting mix. I think there's something fun to be said when you make your own window boxes, hanging baskets, container pots for your yard. I really enjoy the process. I love sharing how it looks in my yard and my method for doing it. I'm noticing these two colors are pretty similar, so actually I'm going to put this one on the other side here. I buy my Osmocote on Amazon. I can buy it in bulk and the price is pretty good, but you can also typically find Osmocote at a lot of the big box stores. There are a lot of nice light colors in this one, so let's go shopping our inventory that we have here. It really does feel like I'm shopping at a flower store because of how many plants I have to play with. And that's one of the beauties of starting your own plants from seed. I have a lot of plants to plant out because I started a lot of plants from seed. And I basically am pacing myself. And if you're in the same boat as me, I highly recommend you do that. Do a little bit at a time. For today, my main goal is to get all my hanging baskets planted up. So this is the 6th Impatiens that I'm putting in this container. And that is plenty. That is more than plenty. Because what's going to happen is it will, over time, fill this all in. And it's going to look so lush and beautiful. Yet 6 is a good enough number to give me that instant gratification that I'm looking for. And if I want to add a little bit more potting mix at this point, I can do that. And I'm just shaking it in. And I just want to press down on all my plants. I want to make sure that they are good and secure and anchored in there. And now it's time to get our spillers. I had shopped my backyard plant nursery for these plants, although I also have them in my landscape. So we're first going to start with the creeping Jenny. It is just starting to wake up, and that's because I just got it from my plant nursery. And the roots do need to be loosened up quite a bit, so I'm doing that. And we're going to tuck that in the corner right here. And even though it's a perennial, I can add a little bit of the slow release fertilizer in there for the plant as well. Right now, the plant is not trailing over. It's just waking up, but eventually it will trail over and it's going to look so pretty. And I love the contrast of the color here. I also got this Lamium from my plant nursery, so we're going to tuck that in on the other side here. What I really like about the creeping Jenny and the Lamium is not only are they great spillers and not only are they perennials here where I live, but they also add a little bit of nice texture, nice different colors than what you see going on with the Impatiens. And I think that's very pleasing to the eye. Add a little bit more slow release fertilizer, and then we can pop this right in here. And that's what the finished product looks like. So there are 6 Impatiens, 1 Lamium, and 1 creeping Jenny. Just imagine when this all fills out and when these two are trailing over the edge. Because it's still raining pretty hard out, I'm letting Mother Nature water these all in. They will bounce right back. They are just looking a little sad because there's been so much rain. This afternoon it's going to clear up. But so far, all the baskets have been filled with the right amount of Impatiens. The only thing left to do now is for me to add 1 Lamium and 1 creeping Jenny into each of these hanging baskets. Then I'm going to get these hung up, and I'll give you an update during my weekly garden tours on how they're looking. I really hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it inspired you in some way. Maybe it gave you some ideas and gave you some motivation to create your own container pot. Start with one. Start very simple. And it doesn't have to be plants that you started from seed. It can be plants that you just bought from a local garden center. If you have any questions or comments, I love hearing from you. Please drop them down below. And until the next video, make it a great day with gardening.